あの頃、俺が仕事から帰ると、いつもお前が待っていた。俺にとってはそれで十分だった。でもあの日、俺が帰ってきたら、その時計だけが残っていた。たった一言、さよならとだけ書かれた手紙と一緒にな。
Hi everyone, nice to see you back on the channel. This is the second video in this series of 4, a series which is based on episode 10 of Cowboy Bebop. I think you all know how it works, so we'll just get stuck in.
あの頃、俺が仕事から帰ると、いつもお前が待っていた。あの頃、俺が仕事から帰ると、いつもお前が待っていた。
Now this bit here isn't too bad, but there's an issue with the to. This to is usually described, including by me, as being one of the 4 main if structures in Japanese. But translating it like that here, or thinking of it like that here, would be something of a mistake. What Jed is saying here clearly is, when I got home from work, you were always waiting for me. This isn't a one-off occurrence. So here I've translated it with a when, right? There's no sense of if here. Don't translate these things, don't interpret these things too mechanically. These structures have not, of course, been neatly designed to match perfectly either our if or our when. It doesn't work like that. There are structures here that overlap to some extent both categories. If I had to express this concept without using to, I'd probably use toki in Japanese. I actually don't think that other if structures would work at all. Ba is no good, nara is no good, tara is closer. It's closer to being accurate than the others, but I don't think it works either. Tara would work, I think, if Jet were talking about a one-off situation. If he were talking about one specific day when he arrived home to find that something was the case, then he could use tara, but he's not. He's talking about a habit. He's talking about something that happened repeatedly, right? If I don't seem completely confident in the way that I talk about these things, there's a good reason for that. This is one of the classic nightmare areas of Japanese grammar. It's very difficult to say anything definitive here. For example, if you ever start reading a lot of Japanese, you'll notice that the conventions of Japanese are different in the written form of the language to what they are in the spoken form of the language. There's a lot more to, for example, in written Japanese. It's often used in contexts in which it wouldn't sound natural in spoken Japanese. I think because Jet is telling a story here, because Jet has some stylized ways of speaking, he might be speaking here in a slightly literary fashion, but it's quite difficult for me to say anything with confidence here. So these structures are a major thorn in the side of anyone learning Japanese. Learning the structures themselves is not particularly difficult, but learning where exactly to use each different structure is a major problem.
俺にとってはそれで十分だった。俺にとってはそれで十分だった。
On this word, what was the pitch accent here? Did you catch it? Let's listen to it again and see if you can catch it.
十分。
And one more time.
十分。
Can you tell? It's actually nakadaka, which means center high, right? So it's low, high, high, low. Now I already knew that this word was nakadaka, but if I hadn't known that, I don't know that I would actually have been able to tell you which pitch accent pattern it was just by listening. Certainly not by listening once in real time. Note here that the drop in pitch is between a normal syllable and the nasal. When I say a normal syllable, I mean one that ends in a vowel, right? Bu, jubung, jubung. It's really quite a subtle thing to try and pick up on. Memorizing all these pitch accent patterns is one thing, but learning to accurately and in real time produce all of this stuff in your own Japanese when you speak, that is a hell of a task. And I think it's worth bearing the difficulty of the task in mind before you allow yourself to get too obsessed with pitch accent. It's a very complex system to learn, and even if you can learn it intellectually, if you like, it's going to be very difficult to reproduce these things accurately in real time.
でもあの日、俺が帰ってきたらその時計だけが残っていた。 でもあの日、俺が帰ってきたらその時計だけが残っていた。
Now this one, to be honest, is a bit nasty. I'm not even sure how accurately I myself use this stuff when I speak Japanese. Back in the day when I used to live in Japan, any understanding that I had of this was purely accidental. It had never been rigorously explained to me, and I genuinely don't know how much of it my brain had managed to pick up. I only learnt about it properly, if you like, years later. Jet is basically saying here, when I got home that day, ... But why does he say anohi instead of sonohi? Remember that the words that begin with so, sore, sono are supposed to be used when you're talking about things that are near the person you're talking to, and the words that begin with a, as in asoko, are, ano, are supposed to be used about things that are not close to you and not close to the person that you're talking to. That's all fine as far as it goes, but when you're talking about a day, well, that's something that's purely abstract. Is it near to you, near to the person you're talking to? What are you supposed to do there? I used to think about this when I spoke Japanese back when I lived in Japan. It occurred to me that I didn't really understand this completely. Unfortunately, I wasn't a good enough student to actually ask someone and try and pin it down, and this is quite difficult. It's actually to do with the degree of knowledge of the person that you're talking to. Here, Jet is telling a story, the details of which are familiar to the person he's talking to. So he says, anohi, because he knows that the girl he's talking to, the woman he's talking to, his ex-girlfriend, knows what happened. If he were telling Alisa, his ex-girlfriend, a story, the details of which were not familiar to her, the details of which were new information to her, he would say sonohi, because the story would all be new to her. This is very, very subtle, and although English does of course have ways of dealing with what's new information or old information and so on and so forth, I don't think it has anything that's a very neat or exact parallel to this. It's not very easy to grasp, not very easy to get the hang of, but I wanted to mention it. Note as well that Jet uses tara here to say when I got home that day. He doesn't use to now because he's not talking about a habit. He's not talking about some sort of schedule. He's talking about a one-off occurrence. That's why he says anohi ore ga kaite kitara. He means specifically on that day, right? Not in general.
たった一言、さよならとだけ書かれた手紙と一緒にな。たった一言、さよならとだけ書かれた手紙と一緒にな。
Here I want to look at the double particle, to dake. I interpret dake as being a sort of particle here. Some people might disagree with that, but I will leave any detailed discussion to the experts. The point I want to make here is that as far as I'm aware, there's no good rule set that tells you which particles can be combined with each other. Some double particles are used so frequently that you just naturally absorb them. Niwa, nimo, dewa, demo. These are all good examples. And then there are double particle combinations that are obviously wrong and unacceptable. You can't say gawa or waga or ga or ga is obviously also forbidden. These are just clearly intuitively wrong. Having said that, there are some combinations that might surprise you. Occasionally you will come across omo. This is quite stiff and formal, but you will see it occasionally. It actually used to be possible to combine o and wa, although the wa, which is written with a ha of course, would change into a ba. So oba used to exist in Japanese, although I think the Japanese would be pretty surprised if you said that today. Let me give you a real sentence that drove home for me just how difficult it was to learn all of the rules here. This is from Escaflowne, which is an anime that some of you may be familiar with. Ore o korosou to sae shita. This is Van talking about his brother Falcon. This sentence, this single sentence, is literally the only reason I know for sure that you can put sae after to in Japanese. It makes perfect sense. The problem here is not comprehension. The problem is production. How would you know in advance that you could do this if nobody had ever told you? Like I said, there's no convenient list that I'm aware of every single double particle combination that can be used in Japanese. You've just got to keep your ears open, you've got to keep your eyes open, and you've got to keep paying attention. For example, can you think of any situation in which you can combine 3 particles consecutively in Japanese? The answer to that question is going to depend on what exactly you consider to be a particle, but there are certain words that are unambiguously particles. So try this, pause the video if you want. Is there any sentence in Japanese where you have 3 articles in a row? Well, for example, you can have this. Kuji made ni wa modoru. Made, ni, and wa are all particles. Are there any examples of quadruple particles in Japanese? I really wouldn't expect to find anything like that, but who knows? Again, it's awkward because it depends on your definition of a particle. The point I'm making is that it's not clear how to absorb all the rules here. You've just got to be attentive. Learn from the natives, at the risk of stating the obvious. That's it for today. I hope that was useful. As always, you'll be seeing a bit more of this in the near future. We'll be continuing with this series of videos taken from this episode of Cowboy Bebop. Until then, thanks very much and ciao ciao, bye bye.